When the founders of the United States sat down and designed a new government, they had a massive puzzle on their hands. How do you build a system that's strong enough to run a country, but also fair enough to represent absolutely everyone? Well, what they came up with was the U.S. Congress, a really brilliant compromise that, believe it or not, still shapes our lives every single day.
So here's what we're going to dive into. First, we'll unpack that original puzzle the founders were trying to solve. Then, we're going to look at the two pieces of their solution, the House and the Senate. We'll also get into how they have to work together to make laws, and, this is the most important part, how this whole thing connects directly back to you.
So, let's start right at the beginning. You see, creating Congress wasn't just about ticking a box for form a government. It was really all about tackling this huge question of fairness that honestly could have torn the country apart before it even got started. I want you to imagine trying to make a decision with a big group of people, right? Should the person with the biggest family get the most say? Or should every single person get just one vote? Well, that's the exact problem the founders were wrestling with at the Constitutional Convention.
And this was the heart of the problem. You had the big states with huge populations, like Virginia, arguing, hey, we should have more representatives because, well, we have more people. But then you had the smaller states, like Delaware, who were terrified their voices would just be completely drowned out. They were demanding that every state get an equal say, period.
And this is where the genius solution comes in. It was called the Great Compromise for a reason. They didn't just pick one side. Instead, it was like they fit two different puzzle pieces together. They created a legislature with two chambers, two houses, where each one used a totally different system of representation. It was an amazing way to make sure both the big and small states felt like they had a fair shot.
All right, so let's break down that compromise, starting with the first part, the House of Representatives. Now, this chamber was made to make the large states happy, and there's a good reason it's often called the People's House.
The House has exactly 435 voting members. Now, that number's not just pulled out of a hat. It's directly connected to the country's population, which, as you know, gets counted every 10 years in the census. It's really simple. The more people your state has, the more representatives you get. And this right here? This shows you exactly what that looks like in the real world. Just look at that difference. California, the biggest state by population, gets 52 members in the House. And then you have Wyoming, the smallest, with just one. It's such a clear picture of what representation by population really means. So what this really means is that representatives are meant to stay very, very close to the people. They've got these short 2-year terms, so they're facing elections all the time. They have to stay in touch with the voters back in their specific local district. And that's why the House is the part of Congress that's supposed to react fastest to what the people want right now.
Okay, so that's one half of the puzzle. Now let's flip over to the other side of that great compromise, the United States Senate. If the House was all about representing people based on population, the Senate was designed to represent the states as equals.
The Senate is a much smaller club, you could say. It has a grand total of 100 members. And why that number? Well, it's simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Every single state, doesn't matter how big or small, gets exactly 2 senators. So California, with its nearly 40 million people, gets 2, and Wyoming, with about 500,000 people, also gets 2. This was the absolute key to protecting the power of the smaller states.
Yes, senators, they're playing a totally different game. They serve for much longer 6-year terms, which is supposed to give them the breathing room to think about long-term issues without constantly worrying about the next election. And they represent their entire state. The idea was for the Senate to be a more stable, thoughtful body, what some of the founders called a cooling saucer.
So when you put them side by side like this, the differences are just crystal clear, right? On one side, you've got the House, big, fast, tied to local districts and population. And on the other, the Senate, small, slow, deliberate, and giving every state the exact same voice. These two very different bodies are designed to balance each other out perfectly. Okay, so we've got these two very different groups, right? How in the world do they actually get anything done together? Well, the answer is in the process, the journey they have to take to turn a simple idea into a law that everyone in the country has to follow. It all kicks off with something called a bill, and that's really just a fancy term for a proposed new law. Any member of Congress in either the House or the Senate can write one up and introduce it. Now, for an idea to actually become a law, it's got to go on a pretty tough journey. First, a majority of the House has to vote to pass it. Then it has to cross the hall to the other chamber and get a majority in the Senate to pass it too. This whole design, needing 2 different groups to agree, is what makes it so careful and deliberate. Only if a bill passes both houses does it finally go to the president to be signed. But wait, even if a bill makes it all the way through Congress, the journey isn't over. The president has a super important final say, and it acts as a major check on Congress's power. So what happens if that bill lands on the president's desk, and they just don't like it?
That's where the president can use the veto. It's a Latin word that literally means "I forbid." By just refusing to sign it, the president can stop the bill in its tracks. It's not totally dead, though. Congress can try to override the veto, but they need a huge majority in both houses to do it, which, let me tell you, is really, really hard to pull off.
All right, we've gone through a lot of structure, a lot of rules and process, but this isn't just some abstract civics lesson. The way Congress is set up has a real, direct impact on every single one of us.
I mean, really, why should you care about 2-year versus 6-year terms, or the complicated path a bill has to take? It's because this entire, complex system is built around one single powerful idea: your participation.
Because here's the bottom line, the most important part of all of this. You don't just live under this system, you are a fundamental part of it. U.S. citizens are the ones who decide who fills all 4,335 of those seats in the House and all 100 seats in the Senate. The people you elect are the ones making the laws that affect everything, from the economy to our healthcare. It's the very definition of self-government.
And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. This tale of two houses isn't just some clever political design from history books. It is the living, breathing machine that allows millions of people to govern themselves, constantly trying to balance the needs of the majority with the rights of everyone.
You know, this was an absolutely brilliant solution for the 1700s. It was designed to solve a very specific problem from a very different time. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. In our super fast-paced, interconnected world today, is this old framework of compromise still the best way for us to govern ourselves?